The morning fog rolled off the Leie River like a reluctant ghost, revealing the red-tiled roofs of Ghent, one by one. Our story begins here, in the year 1865, when Belgium was still finding its voice as a nation, and the old ways wrestled daily with the new. The cobblestones of Corenlay Street gleamed wet in the October light, and from a narrow workshop wedged between a wine merchant and a hat maker, the precise sound of metal filing metal announced that Peter van der Straten had begun his day. He was not, as you might imagine, a tall man. Those who work with small, delicate mechanisms rarely are. His fingers, though, those were instruments of their own. They could feel a pin out of place by a hair's width, detect the slightest burr on a spring that might, months later, cause a lock to fail. A lock, he often told his apprentice Willem, is a promise, and promises should not be broken easily. The workshop smelled of oil and brass shavings, of the coal burning in the small stove, and faintly of the bread from the bakery 3 doors down. Willem was already there, bent over a practice lock, his tongue poking slightly from the corner of his mouth in concentration. The boy, though at 19 he bristled at being called that, had been stealing glances out the window all morning, watching for Marie, the baker's daughter. Young love, our narrator observes with a certain wistfulness, is perhaps the only lock that needs no key. It opens at the slightest touch, often when least expected. Pieter pretended not to notice. He remembered being 19, remembered his late wife Clara at that age, how she would bring him lunch wrapped in checked cloth, her hands always smelling faintly of lavender soap. 5 years now since the consumption took her. The memory was a locked room he rarely entered. "Master van der Straten," Willem said suddenly, his voice cracking slightly with excitement. "Marie says her father might commission a new strongbox. The old one's rusted through." "Does she now?" Peter didn't look up from the peculiar mechanism before him, an English-made padlock that a merchant wanted copied. "And I suppose you happened to discuss this while accidentally meeting at the market?" The boy's ears reddened. "I might have walked past their shop yesterday evening." "And the evening before?" "Perhaps." In 1865, you must understand, courtship was a lock with many tumblers. Each had to fall into place in proper order: family approval, financial prospects, religious compatibility. The heart, inconveniently, often picked the lock before the formal process even began. The morning progressed with the comfortable rhythm of work. Peter taught Willem how to cut a new key blank, how to feel for the subtle differences in spring tension that distinguished a masterwork from mere competence. Outside, Ghent went about its business. The rattle of cartwheels, the call of fishmongers, the deep bell of St. Nicolaaskerk, marking the 10th hour. It was then that Joseph appeared at the door. The man was clearly a servant, but of the old school, his black coat brushed to perfection despite its obvious age, his boots polished to mirrors despite the muddy streets. He stood in the doorway like a man bearing news of a death, which, in a way, he was. "Master van der Straten?" Peter nodded, setting down his file. Something about the man's bearing suggested this was not about a simple locked drawer or stubborn safe. "I come from Wilgenhof, the estate of Baron de Vries. My master requires your particular expertise." The Baron de Vries. Even Peter, who moved in craft circles rather than social ones, knew the name. Textile fortune, old family, new money married to older bloodlines. The combination, in our modern Belgium of 1865, was more common than you might think. Industry needed respectability. Aristocracy needed funds. "The Baron has locks that need attention?" Peter kept his voice neutral. The wealthy, he had learned, appreciated discretion above all. Joseph's face remained composed, but something flickered behind his eyes. "There is a mechanism, a musical box. It has developed peculiarities." "I work with locks, not musical boxes. Perhaps a clockmaker. The box is locked. Has been locked for 3 months since the Baroness passed. Yet it plays." Willem dropped his file. It clattered on the stone floor like a question mark. "Plays?" Peter asked. "How can a locked box play?" "Every night, at midnight, the family is disturbed by this. The Baron offers 20 francs for your discretion and service." 20 francs. More than Peter might see in a month of ordinary work. He thought of the worn spots on his coat, the workshop's roof that needed patching before winter set in properly. Pride, he had learned, was a luxury craftsman could rarely afford. "When?" "Now, if you please. The carriage waits outside." Peter looked at Willem, who was trying very hard to appear responsible rather than desperately curious. "Mind the shop. If Marie's father comes about that strong box, tell him we can offer German steel, not Spanish. The price difference is worth the quality." The boy nodded eagerly, too eagerly. He would close shop early to walk Marie home, Peter knew. Well, let him. October afternoons were made for young love, even in 1865. The carriage was finer than anything Peter had ridden in before. Black lacquer that reflected the afternoon sun like still water, brass fittings polished to gold, seats of burgundy leather that sighed gently under his weight. Joseph sat opposite, his posture suggesting he had made this journey many times, though something in his bearing hinted this particular trip was different. As Ghent fell away behind them, replaced by the flat fields of Flanders, Peter found himself studying the old butler's hands. They trembled slightly, age perhaps, or something more. "The Baroness," he ventured carefully. "She died 3 months ago." "July 23rd. Joseph's voice carried the particular flatness of oft-repeated information. "Her heart. Dr. Vermeer said it had been weakening for years." The October countryside rolled past, stubbled fields where summer wheat had been, farmers burning the last of the season's debris, smoke rising straight up in the still air. Belgium in autumn, our observer notes, has a particular melancholy beauty, as if the land itself remembers all its troubled centuries. "And this musical box began playing 6 weeks ago, September 4th, precisely midnight. Every night since." Peter's mind, trained in mechanisms and logic, began its work. 6 weeks after death, not immediately. That was interesting. The box belonged to the Baroness, a most treasured possession, a wedding gift from the Baron 28 years ago, Swiss-made from Geneva. The road curved through a small wood, beeches and oaks still holding their amber leaves like misers with gold coins. Through the trees, Peter glimpsed what must be Wilgenhof. Red brick and white stone, tall windows reflecting the afternoon light, a manor that spoke of prosperity without ostentation. As they approached, he noticed a young woman in the garden, her dark dress suggesting mourning, though she wore it with the careless grace that suggested duty rather than deep grief. She looked up at the carriage, and even from a distance, Peter could see she was beautiful, in that particular way of women who have never doubted their place in the world. This would be Charlotte, he reasoned, the daughter. The entrance hall of Wilgenhof was all that such halls aspire to be. Marble floors in a chess pattern, portraits of ancestors watching from gilt frames, a staircase that curved upward like a question. But Peter, observer of details, noticed more. The slightly faded spots on the wallpaper where paintings had been removed and sold. The worn edges of the Turkish carpet. The way Joseph's shoulders relaxed slightly now that they were inside, away from watching eyes. "Perhaps you would care to refresh yourself before," Joseph began, but was interrupted by a door slamming somewhere above, followed by rapid footsteps on the stairs. Baron de Vries descended like a man pursued. He was 58 years of dignified bearing, undermined by something wild in his eyes, the look of a rational man confronted by the irrational. His black morning coat was impeccable, his gray whiskers perfectly trimmed. But his hands, Peter noticed, bore ink stains, as if he had been writing frantically. "You are the locksmith?" No preamble, no social niceties. "Peter van der Straten, my lord." "Good, good. You must understand, I am not a superstitious man. I have interests in 3 factories. I sit on the board of the Ghent-Brussels Railway. I do not believe in ghosts." And yet, our narrator observes, he protests too much, as men do when their certainties crack like ice in spring. "The musical box," Peter began. "Would you like to see it? Or perhaps you should wait. Experience it as we do, at midnight." Before Peter could respond, another voice cut through the hall's shadows. "Papa, you're frightening the man." The woman from the garden stood in a doorway, and yes, this was indeed Charlotte. Up close, she had her father's strong jaw softened by her mother's delicate features. But there was something else, a watchfulness, as if she were perpetually calculating odds. "My daughter," the Baron said unnecessarily. "Charlotte, this is the locksmith, yes. Come to solve our supernatural problem with earthly tools." Her smile had edges. How refreshing. A door opened at the hall's far end, and another figure emerged, a younger man, though his face bore lines that suggested worry beyond his years. Edouard, the son, moved with the careful precision of someone who had drunk too much at lunch and was trying to hide it. "Another expert?" His laugh was bitter. "What's next, father? A medium? A priest to exorcise mother's spirit?" "Edouard," the Baron's voice carried a warning that had been issued many times before. The son shrugged, a gesture that managed to convey both defiance and defeat. "I merely observe that Mother, who rarely got her way in life, seems remarkably effective in death." The tension in the hall was palpable. Each family member a lock with different combinations, none quite fitting with the others. Peter had seen this before in his work. Families were mechanisms too, and death often revealed how poorly the parts meshed. "Perhaps," he said carefully, "I should see the room?" The Baron nodded quickly, grateful for the redirect. Yes, of course. Joseph, show him to Matilda's chambers." The climb to the second floor was accompanied by the musical counterpoint of a house full of secrets. Boards that creaked in particular patterns, doors not quite latched, the whisper of fabric against wallpaper as someone listened from behind barely cracked doors. The Baroness's room, when Joseph finally opened it with a key from his impressive ring, was a preserved moment. Everything exactly as she had left it. The silver brush on the vanity, a book open on the bedside table, reading spectacles folded on its pages. And there, on a table by the window overlooking the rose garden, sat the musical box. It was beautiful in the way Swiss mechanisms are. Not ostentatious, but perfect. walnut wood inlaid with mother of pearl, depicting a scene of alpine flowers. The lock was unusual, not a standard pin tumbler, but something more complex, with a keyhole that suggested internal mechanisms of extraordinary delicacy. "The key?" Pieter asked. "Lost, or rather the Baroness hid it before she died. We've searched everywhere." Pieter approached the box slowly, his fingers already reading its surfaces like braille. Good work, masterful even. The lock alone would have cost a fortune. "And it plays Beethoven?" "Mozart, the Requiem. The same portion every night for exactly 3 minutes." As if on cue, the great clock in the corridor chimed 6. Dinner would be served soon, Pieter knew. The rhythms of great houses were as predictable as clockwork, which gave him an idea, though one he kept to himself. "I should like to examine the room," he said. "Alone, if possible. And then, yes, I should like to be here at midnight." Joseph nodded. "I'll have a room prepared for you. The Blue Room, it's called, just down the corridor." Morning came to Wilgenhof with a peculiar stillness, as if the house itself were holding its breath. Pieter had witnessed the midnight playing. The box had indeed sprung to life at the first stroke of 12, its mechanism producing Mozart's Requiem with crystalline clarity. The family had gathered like moths to a flame, they feared, each face revealing different shades of dread and fascination. Now, in the gray light of October 13th, Pieter worked alone in the Baroness's chamber. His tools were spread on a velvet cloth, picks of varying thickness, tension wrenches, a jeweler's loop, and most importantly, his listening rod, a brass tube that when placed against a mechanism could reveal its secrets through sound alone. The musical box's lock was a marvel, Swiss certainly, but modified. The keyhole showed signs of recent work, tiny scratches that suggested someone had attempted picking it, though without success. Amateur work, hasty. Someone in the household, perhaps, trying to solve the mystery themselves. Through the window he observed Anna Moreau, the governess, walking in the garden. She moved with purpose toward the old chapel, glancing back at the house as if checking she wasn't followed. Interesting. In Pieter's experience, those who checked for observers usually had reasons. "You're wasting your time with the lock." Pieter turned to find Edward in the doorway, his morning coat askew, the smell of brandy already on his breath despite the early hour. The son's eyes were bloodshot, but sharp, the paradox of the intelligent wastrel. "Am I?" Pieter continued his examination, running his fingers along the box's base. "Mother was too clever for simple locks. She liked puzzles, mechanisms within mechanisms." Edward moved into the room, his gait slightly unsteady. "Did you know she studied mathematics? Before she married, of course. After that, Father preferred she focus on more appropriate pursuits." The bitterness in his voice could have etched glass. Pieter filed this information away while discovering something interesting, a nearly invisible seam along the box's left side, covered by the inlay pattern. "Your father mentioned she hid the key," Edward laughed, short and sharp. "Father mentions many things, not all of them true. For instance, he hasn't mentioned his Tuesday visits to Ghent, has he? To see his particular friend at the opera house?" Before Pieter could respond, footsteps echoed in the corridor. Charlotte appeared, dressed for riding, her color high with either exercise or anger. "Edouard, you're needed in Father's study. Monsieur Delacroix is here." The change in Edouard was immediate. His casual slouch became rigid, his face paled. "Delacroix? But he wasn't supposed to come until next week? Yes, well, apparently your markers have been sold to someone less patient. Charlotte's voice was ice. Father is negotiating. You should be there. Edouard left quickly, his earlier bravado evaporating. Charlotte remained, studying Pieter with those calculating eyes. My brother owes 7,000 francs, she said conversationally, as if discussing the weather. Gaming debts. Father will pay, of course, he always does, though soon there may be nothing left to pay with. She moved to her mother's vanity, picking up the silver brush, setting it down again. Mother knew about the debts, about Father's opera singer, about all of it. She kept journals, you know. Hidden them somewhere in this room. Our locksmith, wise in the ways of families and their secrets, recognized an invitation to conspiracy when he heard one. But he had learned to be cautious with the powerful, even when they seemed to offer alliance. If the musical box disturbs the family so much, he said carefully, why not simply remove it or destroy it? Charlotte's laugh was surprisingly genuine. Destroy it? Father would sooner burn the house down. It was his wedding gift to her, cost him a fortune when he had nothing but prospects. It represents the man he was before. She gestured vaguely at the room, the house, the weight of 28 years. Before? Before he became what money made him, what we all became. She left then, her riding boots clicking on the floor with military precision. Pieter returned to his work, but his mind was processing this new information. The house was full of locks, not all of them brass and steel. By afternoon, he had made a discovery. The box's base contained a hidden compartment, accessible only when the main mechanism was in a particular position. Inside, wrapped in silk, was a small key, but not for the musical box. This key was modern, recently cut, and bore the mark of a Ghent locksmith he knew. Curious. Willem arrived as the sun was setting, carrying Pieter's additional tools and news from the shop. Master, there was trouble last night. Someone tried to break in. They were after your drawings, the ones for the Antwerp Bank Commission. Pieter's revolutionary lock design, a mechanism that would change with each use, making picking nearly impossible. Only 3 people knew of it, and one was in this house. Was anything taken? No, but they'll try again. I've set watches with the neighbors. Smart boy. Pieter sent him back with instructions, then returned to the Baroness's room as darkness fell. He had found something else, a tiny hole in the floor, recently drilled, nearly invisible unless you knew where to look. He inserted a wire, feeling it disappear into the floor's depths, toward the room below. The corridor clock began its journey toward midnight, and Pieter positioned himself to observe not just the musical box, but the room itself. Anna Moreau appeared at 11:40, claiming she wanted to check the windows. She seemed surprised to find Pieter there, more surprised when he showed no intention of leaving. The family usually gathers, she said carefully. Let them. I need to observe undisturbed. She left reluctantly, and Pieter noticed she turned left instead of right, away from her own quarters, following someone or meeting them. At 11:55, Pieter placed his listening rod against the floor where he'd found the hole. He could hear it, the faint sound of another mechanism below, beginning its own countdown. The corridor clock chimed midnight, and immediately the musical box began to play, its melancholy notes filling the room. But Pieter was listening to something else, the almost inaudible sound of wire under tension, vibrating like a guitar string too high for normal hearing. The Baroness had indeed left a puzzle, but not the supernatural one her family feared. The 14th of October brought rain to Wilgenhof, turning the gardens into impressionist paintings viewed through water-streaked glass. Peter stood in the corridor outside the Baroness's room, studying the tall case clock that dominated the space. French, as Joseph had mentioned the previous evening, with an 8-day movement that should have been purely mechanical, purely predictable. Should have been. The butler found him there, running his hands along the clock's case with the patience of a blind man reading a love letter. "It was delivered 3 years ago," Joseph offered without being asked. "A gift to the Baron from a business associate in Lyon." 3 years, but the Baroness had died only 3 months ago. Peter filed this discrepancy away with all the others he was collecting, like a magpie building a nest of inconsistencies. "Tell me about the house's history," Peter said, still examining the clock. "The old history." Joseph's expression shifted, became carefully neutral, the face of a servant who has learned that knowledge is sometimes a burden. "Wilgenhof was built in 1628 by a merchant in the Spanish trade, the Vandermeer family. They say he made his fortune in ways that, well, it was a different time." Our narrator must pause here to note that in Flanders, a different time often means a darker time, when Spanish soldiers enforced their particular brand of faith with steel and fire, and merchants who collaborated grew rich on their neighbors' misery. The Vandermeers died out in 1792. The last son was found dead in what's now the Blue Room, your room actually. Heart failure, they said, though. He was only 23. Joseph's voice dropped. "The house stood empty for 40 years before the Baron bought it." Peter thought of his restless night in the Blue Room, the way shadows seemed to move independently of their sources. But he was a man of reason, of mechanisms. Shadows were just absence of light, nothing more. "Master van der Straten?" Charlotte's voice came from behind them. She was dressed for town, but her gloves were in her hands, twisted like worry made manifest. "Might I speak with you, privately?" Joseph withdrew with practiced invisibility, and Charlotte led Peter to a small morning room that overlooked the stables. She closed the door carefully, then turned to face him with an expression of determined desperation. "I need your help. Not with the musical box, with a lock." Peter waited. In his experience, the powerful always eventually asked for what they really wanted, if you gave them enough silence to fill. "There's a cottage on the estate's eastern border, abandoned, supposedly. But I know Mother used it for privacy. She kept something there, something that could help us understand." She broke off, started again. "I've tried to enter, but the lock is beyond ordinary. Like your work, perhaps." Before Peter could respond, the door burst open. Edward stood there, swaying slightly, his face flushed with more than drink. "Plotting with the locksmith, sister? How democratic of you." "You're drunk, observant as always. Did you tell him about your midnight rides? About your artist friend in the cottage?" Charlotte's face went white, then red. "You followed me." "I follow everyone. It's remarkable what people do when they think they're unobserved." Edward's laugh was bitter as winter wine. "Our governess, for instance, meets someone in the chapel every Thursday. And father, enough!" Charlotte's voice could have cut glass, but Edward was beyond stopping. Father leaves his study window unlocked every Tuesday and Thursday night. For his returns from Ghent, he claims, but I've seen someone else use that entrance. Someone in skirts. The siblings faced each other across years of accumulated grievance, and Pieter recognized the moment for what it was, a mechanism about to break from internal pressure. He intervened with professional calm. "The cottage lock, I'll examine it. This afternoon, if you can arrange it." Charlotte nodded quickly, grateful for the redirect. Edward laughed again and stumbled from the room, leaving behind the sour smell of fear, disguised as brandy. In the afternoon, as promised, Charlotte led Pieter through the dripping gardens to the cottage. It huddled beneath ancient oaks like a secret made solid, its windows dark with years of grime. The lock, when Pieter examined it, made him whistle softly. German work, highly sophisticated, installed recently, within the last year, he judged. "This would have cost a fortune," he said. "Mother had her own money." An inheritance from her grandmother which Father couldn't touch. Charlotte watched him work, her presence a testament to desperation overcoming propriety. "Can you open it?" Pieter could, though it took him nearly an hour, each pin falling into place with reluctant precision. The door opened onto a single room, furnished simply but with purpose. A desk, a chair, a bookshelf. And on the desk, a journal bound in red leather. Charlotte reached for it eagerly, then stopped. "No, you read it first. I'm not sure I want to know alone." The October rain drummed on the cottage roof as Pieter opened the journal. The Baroness's handwriting was precise, mathematical, each letter formed with geometric perfection. The entries began 2 years ago, documenting her discovery of her husband's infidelity, her growing awareness of Edouard's debts, her knowledge that Charlotte loved not her naval officer fiancé, but a penniless painter. But the final entries were different. They detailed correspondence with a Swiss craftsman, specifications for modifications to a musical box, the installation of a mechanism that would ensure she was not forgotten, even in death. Especially in death. "She knew she was dying," Charlotte whispered, reading over his shoulder. "For months, she knew." The last entry was dated July 20th, 3 days before her death. "The mechanism is complete. Every midnight, they will remember me. H will understand that some locks cannot be picked, some secrets cannot be buried, some loves cannot be forgotten. I go to my rest knowing that my presence will remain, precise as clockwork, inevitable as time itself." Charlotte was crying silently, tears running down her cheeks like the rain on the windows. She knew everything, about all of us. But Pieter was looking at something else, a technical drawing tucked into the journal's back cover. It showed not just the musical box, but its connection to the corridor clock, the precise routing of wire through walls and floors, the secondary mechanism that would ensure the box played even without a key. The Baroness hadn't just planned her revenge, she had engineered it with mathematical precision. "Your mother," he said slowly, "was a remarkable woman." Charlotte's laugh was half sob. She was a ghost before she died. Now she's more alive than when she breathed. Thunder rolled across the Flemish countryside, and Pieter thought of his own wife, dead these 5 years. Would Clara have wanted to be remembered like this, through fear and guilt and mechanical ingenuity? Or would she have preferred the gentler haunting of lavender soap and checked cloth? The morning of October 15th dawned clear and cold. the previous day's rain having washed the sky to a brittle blue. Peter began his investigation at first light, armed with the Baroness's technical drawings and a growing understanding of her elaborate design. The wire she had mentioned, silk-wrapped copper, nearly invisible, would have to run from the corridor clock to the musical box, a distance of some 8 meters through 2 walls. He started in the corridor, examining the clock case with methodical precision. Behind its weights and pendulum, hidden by the mechanism's complexity, he found it. A small hole drilled with surgical precision, through which a wire no thicker than a hair disappeared into the wall. The clock's striking mechanism had been modified, subtly, brilliantly, so that at midnight a tiny additional lever would engage, pulling the wire with just enough force to trigger something at the other end. Following the wire's path required removing a section of wainscoting, work he did carefully while the household was at breakfast. Behind the wood, running through holes drilled at perfect angles, the silk-wrapped copper thread continued its journey like a secret blood vessel through the house's body. Remarkable work. Peter turned to find Anna Moreau watching him, her expression unreadable. The governess moved with the particular silence of those who have learned to be invisible in great houses. "You knew," Peter said. It wasn't a question. She tilted her head slightly. "I knew many things. Which particular knowledge do you mean?" "About the mechanism. The Baroness would have needed help. Someone to hold things while she worked. Someone to distract the family during installation." Anna's smile was sad and distant. "Matilda was the only person in this house who saw me as more than furniture. She taught me mathematics in exchange for French conversation." We spent hours discussing Pascal, Descartes, the beauty of logical proofs. Our locksmith recognized the tone, the particular grief of those who have lost not just a friend, but an intellectual equal, a rare commodity for women in 1865, even in modernizing Belgium. "The Baron," Anna continued, "required my services in other ways. Oh, nothing improper now. He ended that years ago when his interests shifted to younger entertainment. But Matilda knew about our past arrangement. She could have dismissed me at any time. Instead, she kept me close, taught me, trusted me." Before Pieter could respond, Willem burst through the main entrance, his young face flushed with exertion and alarm. "Master, you must return immediately. The shop—" "Breathe, boy. What's happened?" "Monsieur Hertog, the locksmith from Vistrat. He's filed a complaint with the guild. Says you stole his design for the variable mechanism. He has witnesses who claim they saw me copying documents at his shop." Peter felt the cold touch of professional disaster. Hertog, his rival for the Antwerp Bank Commission, playing a desperate gambit. False witnesses were easy to buy in Ghent's rougher quarters, and guild investigations, once begun, could destroy a reputation regardless of outcome. "When is the hearing?" "Tomorrow morning. The guildmaster says if you don't appear, they'll rule in Hertog's favor by default." The Baron appeared in the hallway, his morning coat impeccable, his expression considerably less so. "Problems, Master van der Straten." Peter explained briefly, professionally, though his mind was calculating rapidly. The timing was too convenient. Someone had informed Hertog that Peter would be away from Ghent, unable to respond quickly to accusations. "This commission you mention," the Baron said slowly. "It's valuable. 1,500 francs, my lord. Plus future contracts if the bank is satisfied." The Baron's eyes sharpened, the look of a man who understood money in all its forms. "And this rival, Hertog, he would benefit from your absence?" Considerably. Take my carriage. Joseph will drive you to Ghent immediately. Resolve this matter and return by evening. I'll ensure your equipment remains untouched." The Baron paused. "I have some influence with the Guildmaster. A letter from me might clarify matters." Peter stared. Such an offer from a man of the Baron's standing was extraordinary. "Why would you?" "Because I recognize competence when I see it. And because," the Baron's voice dropped, "I need this matter resolved. The musical box, these midnight visitations, they're destroying my household. Edward drinks more each day. Charlotte speaks of breaking her engagement. The servants whisper of curses." "I need answers, Master van der Straten, and you seem the only one capable of providing them." Within an hour, Pieter was racing toward Ghent in the Baron's carriage, Willem beside him, clutching a sealed letter bearing the de Vries arms. The countryside blurred past, but Pieter's mind was on the wire he'd been tracing, on the Baroness's elaborate revenge, on the cottage journal with its meticulous plans. The Guildhall in Ghent was bustling with the usual mix of craftsmen, apprentices, and those who made their living from others' disputes. Hertog was there, a thin man with the permanent squint of someone who spent his days peering at tiny mechanisms. His witnesses, two rough-looking men who clearly knew more about tavern brawls than lock mechanisms, flanked him like poorly trained dogs. The Guildmaster, Joost van Eyck, was a fair man who had known Pieter's father. He read the Baron's letter slowly, his eyebrows rising with each line. "These are serious counter-accusations, Master Hertog. The Baron suggests you've been bribing night watchmen to observe Master van der Straten's workshop, that you've attempted break-ins." Hertog's face went pale. "Lies! Noble lies to protect." The Baron also mentions that he's considering commissioning new locks for all his textile factories. 12 facilities in total. He wonders if the Guild can recommend an honest craftsman. Van Eyck's tone was dry as August dirt. "Perhaps we should investigate these matters more thoroughly over the next several weeks." The threat was clear. Hertog withdrew his complaint with ill grace, his witnesses vanishing like smoke. Van Eyck drew Pieter aside afterward. "You've made an interesting friend. The Baron's influence reaches far. But be careful, such men's friendship always carries a price." The race back to Wilgenhof took the rest of the day. As the carriage rolled through the estate's gates, the sun was setting, painting the manor's walls the color of old blood. Peter could see lights in the Baroness's room, figures moving behind the curtains. He found the family gathered there, the Baron, Charlotte, Edward, seemingly sober for once, Anna Moreau, and surprisingly, a man in priest's vestments, who could only be Father Antonius from the village church. "Ah, van der Straten," the Baron said. "Father Antonius insists on blessing the room before midnight. Personally, I think—" The priest, younger than Peter had expected, with intelligent eyes that suggested university education, interrupted gently. "I think God works through understanding, Baron, through knowledge and truth. If Master van der Straten has discovered something about this mechanism, perhaps we should hear it before we resort to more dramatic measures." Peter stood before the assembled family, the Baroness's journal heavy in his hands. The October evening pressed against the windows like a living thing, and he could feel the weight of their expectations, some hoping for revelation, others clearly dreading it. "Your wife, Baron, was a remarkable woman," he began carefully. "Her understanding of mechanics rivaled many guildmasters. This journal documents her work over the past 2 years. He opened the leather-bound book, its pages rustling like autumn leaves. The Baron reached for it, then stopped, his hand suspended between desire and fear. It was Charlotte who finally took it, her fingers trembling as she recognized her mother's precise handwriting. 2 years ago, Pieter continued, the Baroness discovered she had a weak heart. Dr. Vermeer confirmed this, though he was sworn to secrecy. She knew her time was limited. Edouard laughed bitterly. So she decided to haunt us? How maternal, she decided, Anna Moreau said quietly, to ensure she wasn't forgotten. The governess moved into the lamplight, her face revealing a grief that had been carefully hidden. She knew about everything, the affairs, the debts, the deceptions. But rather than confront you all in life, she chose this elaborate farewell. Father Antonius had been reading over Charlotte's shoulder, his expression growing more thoughtful with each page. These calculations, they're extremely sophisticated. The timing mechanisms, the resonance frequencies. She studied for this. She did more than study, Peter said. He led them to the section of the wall he'd opened earlier, showing them the path of the nearly invisible wire. She hired a Swiss craftsman to modify the musical box, but the installation of this system, this was her own work, completed over months when the house slept. The Baron's face had gone gray. But why? If she knew about everything, why not simply confront me? Anna's laugh was soft and sad. Because you would have promised to change, as you had before. And she would have pretended to believe you, as she had before. This way, she changed the conversation entirely. Charlotte had reached the journal's final entries. Her voice was steady as she read aloud. H believes that locks keep secrets safe, but every lock is also a confession that there is something worth hiding. I leave him with a lock that cannot be picked, a secret that announces itself nightly, a presence that cannot be dismissed or ignored. Our narrator must observe here that revenge, served cold, is said to be a dish best enjoyed. But the Baroness had invented something entirely new. Revenge served with clockwork regularity, measured and mechanical and inescapable. There's more, Peter said. He had debated whether to reveal this next part, but truth, like a picked lock, tends to open completely once started. She documents correspondence with various parties. Edward, your creditors, she had been paying them secretly for years, keeping them from destroying you entirely. Edward's swagger collapsed like a bad soufflé. What? 300 francs monthly from her private funds. The records are all here. Peter turned pages, showing columns of figures. Charlotte, she knew about Peter Bruegel, your artist. She had been commissioning paintings from him anonymously, providing him income so he could court you properly when your engagement to the naval officer inevitably ended. Charlotte sank into a chair, her composed facade finally cracking. She never said. I thought she disapproved. And Baron, Peter continued, though he took no pleasure in it. She documents your Tuesday visits to Ghent, yes. But also your increasing debts to maintain appearances, the factories you've secretly mortgaged, the fortune that exists now mainly in reputation. The room fell silent except for the rain that had begun again, tapping against the windows like skeletal fingers. Each family member seemed to shrink into themselves, processing the weight of having been completely known, completely seen. She also, Father Antonius said gently, closing the journal, expresses love. Disappointment, yes. Hurt, certainly. But throughout, there is love. I go to my rest, she writes, hoping that the mechanism of our family, though flawed, might be repaired by those who remain. The corridor clock began its journey toward midnight. They all turned to look at the musical box, sitting silent and perfect on its table. Peter moved to the wall where he'd exposed the wire. "I can sever this," he said. "The music will stop. The mechanism will become merely ornamental again." "No," the Baron's voice was rough with unshed tears. "Not yet. Let us hear it once more, knowing what it truly is." They arranged themselves around the room like penitents awaiting absolution. As midnight approached, Peter found himself thinking of Clara again, of the locks we place on our hearts, of the keys we hide even from ourselves. The clock struck 12. The almost inaudible tension of the wire hummed through the walls, and the musical box opened itself, revealing the tiny automaton within, a woman at a pianoforte, her miniature fingers finding keys with mechanical precision. Mozart's Requiem filled the room, its notes speaking of death and redemption, of endings that were also beginnings. Charlotte wept openly. Edouard stood rigid, his usual sneer replaced by something raw and vulnerable. The Baron reached for Anna Moreau's hand, not romantically, but as one survivor reaches for another in a storm. She allowed it, her own eyes fixed on the automaton's endless performance. When the music stopped, exactly 3 minutes later, the silence was different, fuller, more honest. "Master van der Straten," the Baron said finally, "what would you advise?" Peter considered. In his experience, mechanisms could be repaired, but only if one understood what was broken. The wire serves its purpose, ensuring remembrance, but the journal, the cottage, the secrets documented there, these are the true locks that need opening. Your wife gave you keys, though they're disguised as revelations. Father Antonius nodded slowly. Confession without absolution is merely performance. But understanding can lead to grace. "Tomorrow," Charlotte said suddenly. "Tomorrow we'll gather at the cottage, all of us. We'll read everything, acknowledge everything." She looked at her father, at Edward. "Mother deserved truth from us in life. The least we can offer is truth after her death." Anna Moreau spoke quietly. She would have liked that. She always said that mathematics never lied, that numbers were the only honest language. A ghost of a smile touched her lips, though she also said that love was the one calculation that never quite balanced. The October night drew close around Wilgenhof, but something had shifted in its atmosphere. The house still held its secrets, but now they were shared secrets, acknowledged if not yet fully understood. Our locksmith had done what he did best, opened what was closed, revealed what was hidden. The rest, as with all human mechanisms, would depend on how well the parts could learn to work together. The 17th of October brought unexpected warmth, what the farmers called St. Luke's little summer, those few days when autumn pretends to be spring before winter's final arrival. Peter spent the morning in detailed examination of the musical box's mechanism, finally understanding the full scope of the Baroness's engineering. The Swiss craftsman she'd commissioned had been a master, but the modifications went beyond mere mechanical ingenuity. The box contained 3 separate movements, one for the music, one for the automaton, and a third that served as a counting mechanism. This Third movement recorded each playing. Tiny brass pins marking the passage of nights like a mechanical calendar of grief. 73 times, he told Charlotte when she came to check his progress. The box has played exactly 73 times. She traced a finger along the box's inlaid surface, careful not to disturb his work. One for each day since it began. Mother always did appreciate precision. The morning's warmth had brought the household outdoors. Through the window, Peter could see Edward walking with Father Antonius in the garden. Their conversation apparently serious. Edward's hands moved expressively, but without the aggressive gestures that usually marked his discourse. The Baron was in his study with a stream of visitors, creditors, Peter suspected, though they departed looking more satisfied than such men usually did. "He's selling the racehorses," Charlotte explained, following Peter's gaze, "and the house in Brussels. Mother's journal showed him exactly how much he needs to save the factories, and he's finally accepting the mathematics of it." Our locksmith returned to his work, but Charlotte didn't leave. She seemed to be gathering courage for something. Finally, the artist, Peter. Mother commissioned 13 paintings from him. Landscapes of places she loved but never visited. Switzerland mostly. Mountains and mechanical workshops. She never traveled? Father preferred she stay close. For the sake of appearances, he said, though now I wonder if he feared what she might become if she ever truly spread her wings. Charlotte moved to her mother's desk, opening a drawer Pieter had unlocked earlier. "I found letters here from a professor at the University of Louvain. He wanted her to publish her mathematical proofs under a male pseudonym. She refused. If her work had value, she wrote, it should stand under her own name or not at all." The cottage revelation had changed Charlotte. The brittleness was still there, but tempered now with something softer, understanding perhaps, or maybe just a relief of finally knowing the truth. Anna Moreau appeared in the doorway. "Master van der Straten, might I show you something?" She led him to a room he hadn't seen before, her own quarters, modest but meticulously organized. From beneath her bed she pulled a wooden case. Inside were tools, fine Swiss instruments for working with watch mechanisms. "Mathilde gave me these. She taught me to repair timepieces, said it was meditation through concentration. I helped her install the wire system." Anna's voice carried no apology, only statement of fact. "She needed assistance for the part she couldn't reach, and she trusted me to keep her secret." "You could be dismissed for this," Peter observed. "By whom? The Baron who used me and discarded me? Charlotte who's planning to elope with her artist? Edward who can barely maintain his own existence?" Anna's smile was sharp as a lockpick. "This family has no authority left, only the pretense of it. Besides, I have appointment letters from 3 households in Brussels, all seeking a governess who can teach mathematics alongside French." She showed him her own journal then, filled with mechanical drawings and equations. The student had learned well from her teacher. "The Baroness left me money, too, enough to establish myself independently. But I wanted to see this through, to ensure her mechanism worked as planned." That afternoon, Peter made a discovery that changed his understanding once again. Hidden within the musical box's base, beneath the first secret compartment, was a second space containing a different key, this one ornate, old, bearing the Vandermeer family crest. "The original owners," Joseph said when Peter showed him. "But what could it open?" They left nothing but the house itself. It was Willem, arriving with supplies from Ghent, who provided the answer. "Master, that mark on the key shaft, I've seen it before. In the old locksmithing texts. It's not for a door or box. It's for a clock case." The corridor clock, of course. Peter approached it with new purpose, finding the hidden keyhole behind a decorative brass rosette. The key turned with the smooth action of well-maintained mechanics, and a panel opened to reveal a space containing documents, old papers yellow with age. The Baron, summoned from his negotiations, read them with growing amazement. "These are debt papers. The Vandermeers owed my grandfather money, substantial sums. These documents would have given him claim to this estate decades before I bought it." "Your grandfather knew?" Charlotte asked. "He must have. But he never claimed the debt. And when the house came for sale—" The Baron's voice trailed off as he understood. "He arranged for me to buy it without knowing. Created my fortune's foundation without my knowledge." Father Antonius, who had been studying the papers, pointed to a notation at the bottom. "Look, a witness signature. Mathilde Vermeer, your wife's maiden name." "Her grandfather," the Baron said slowly. "He was my grandfather's clerk. She would have known this history all along." The mechanism of the past, our narrator observes, often drives the present in ways we never suspect. Every family is a clock wound by previous generations. Its springs and gears set in motion long before the current hour strikes. "She chose you," Anna said quietly. "Knowing all of this, she chose to marry you anyway. That should tell you something about the woman she was." The Baron stood silent for a long moment, then spoke with unusual clarity. "Tomorrow, Master van der Straten, I want you to do something for me. I want you to open the musical box properly, not break it or disable it, but open it as it was meant to be opened. My wife was too clever to create a lock without a key, even if she hid it well." Peter nodded, though privately he wondered if some locks were meant to remain closed, their secrets better left as mysteries. But he was a craftsman, and craftsmen complete their work. As evening fell, he found himself in the garden with Father Antonius, who had lingered after the others dispersed. "You're troubled," the priest observed. "I came here to solve a mechanical problem. Instead, I've become part of a human one." "Aren't they always intertwined? We build machines to serve our purposes, but they end up revealing our natures." The priest pulled out a pipe, filled it thoughtfully. The Baroness understood this. Her mechanism isn't just about revenge or remembrance. It's about truth, delivered in measured doses, like medicine. And when the truth is fully known, when the last lock is opened, Father Antonius smiled. Then, Master van der Straten, the real work begins. Anyone can pick a lock. The question is whether we can repair what we find inside. The morning of October 18th arrived with frost on the windows and tension in the air thick as winter wool. Peter had worked through the night, his fingers reading the musical box's mechanism like a psalm of brass and steel. The key existed, he was certain now, but not as a separate object. The Baroness had built it into the box itself, a combination of movements that would release the lock from within. The family gathered in the main drawing room at 10 o'clock, a formal assembly that felt more like a trial than a meeting. The Baron had dressed with particular care, his morning coat impeccable, though Pieter noticed his hands trembled slightly as he poured brandy, despite the early hour. Charlotte wore black, not morning dress, but something more severe, as if armor could be fashioned from silk and whalebone. Edouard, surprisingly, appeared completely sober, his usual defensive sneer replaced by something raw and watchful. "Before we begin," the Baron said, his voice carrying the authority of a man who had made difficult decisions, "there are matters to address. Edouard, I've settled your debts with Delacroix, all 7,000 francs. Edouard started. "Father, I didn't ask." "No, you never ask. You simply accumulate disasters and hope they'll disappear." The Baron's tone wasn't cruel, merely factual. "Your mother knew this about you." "She also knew you had talent for the business when sober. So here's my proposition. Take over the Kortrijk factory, smallest of our operations, but profitable. Learn to manage it, and yourself, or lose everything. And if I fail, then you'll fail having tried, which your mother would have respected more than succeeding without effort." Charlotte stood suddenly. "Since we're speaking truthfully, I should announce that I've broken my engagement to Lieutenant Van Houten this morning by letter." The Baron's face darkened. "Charlotte, I'm going to marry Peter Bruegel, the artist Mother was supporting. We'll live simply on what his paintings bring and what I can earn teaching music." She met her father's eyes steadily. Mother knew love was a calculation that never balanced. "I choose to be bad at mathematics." Before the Baron could respond, the door burst open. 3 men entered, rough-looking fellows whose presence in the drawing room was as incongruous as wolves in a chapel. The lead man, scarred and burly, held papers. "Baron de Vries, I'm here representing certain interests in Antwerp. Your son owes additional sums, 15,000 francs from last month's tables. We've come to collect." Edouard went white. "That's impossible. I haven't been to Antwerp in months. Your signature says otherwise." The man produced documents that indeed bore Edouard's name, though Peter, observing from his corner, noticed the ink was suspiciously fresh. The Baron rose, his composure cracking. "This is extortion. I'll summon the authorities. You'll pay, or we'll take equivalent value." The scarred man's smile was unpleasant. "Starting with that pretty music box we've heard so much about. Swiss, isn't it? Worth at least 5,000. "No!" Anna Moreau's voice cut through the room like a blade. She stood in the doorway, and behind her, incredibly, stood a man in the uniform of the Belgian civil police. "These men are fraudsters." "I sent word to Brussels 3 days ago, when I recognized their handwriting on threatening letters. The same hand that forged Edward's signatures." The police officer stepped forward. "Gentlemen, you'll come with me. Forgery and extortion. The magistrate will be most interested." The confrontation was brief but intense. The criminals, faced with unexpected authority, folded like bad cards. As they were led away, the scarred man turned back. "This isn't over, de Vries. You have enemies you don't even know about." "Perhaps," the Baron replied with recovered dignity, "but I also have allies I'm only now discovering." When order was restored, all eyes turned to Anna. She stood straight, no longer the invisible governess, but something more formidable. "I've spent 15 years in this house, watching, learning, protecting when I could. Mathilde knew these men would come eventually. Edouard's real debts were bait for larger predators. She taught me to recognize forgeries, to understand the criminal patterns of Antwerp's gambling halls." "You've been protecting us," Charlotte said wonderingly. "I've been protecting her memory. and completing her work. Peter cleared his throat. Speaking of which, I believe I've solved the musical box's final secret. He led them back to the Baroness's room, where the box sat in morning sunlight that made its inlay gleam like precious stones. The lock doesn't need a key in the traditional sense. It needs a song, played on the mechanism itself. He demonstrated pressing the inlay in a specific pattern, not random, but musical notes: C, E flat, G, B flat. The opening notes of Mozart's Requiem, but in reverse. A musical palindrome. Your wife's mathematical mind at work. The lock clicked open with a sound like a sigh. Inside, beyond the mechanical works, was a final compartment containing a single sheet of paper. The Baron took it with shaking hands and read aloud, "My beloved family, if you are reading this, then you have learned to work together, to see past surfaces to truth. The mechanism that has tormented you these months was my way of ensuring you would not forget, not just me, but yourselves, who you are when stripped of pretense. Hendrik, I knew of your affairs and forgave them, for I too had my secrets. Edward, your weakness is not in cards, but in believing yourself worthless. You are not. Charlotte, follow your heart, not society's expectations. Anna, you were my truest friend. Be free now. The music will stop when you choose to stop it. But remember, some mechanisms, once understood, work better than before they were examined. With love eternal, Mathilde." The room fell silent. Through the window, church bells began to ring, 11 o'clock, their bronze voices carrying across the Flemish countryside like benedictions. "Master van der Straten," the Baron said finally, "what would it cost to modify the mechanism? Not to stop it, but to change it, to play at a different time perhaps, or different music?" Peter considered. "It could be done, though the question is whether you should alter her final gift." "Not alter," Charlotte said suddenly. "Complete. Mother was a mathematician. She would understand that formulas can be refined." She moved to the box, touching it gently. "Once a week, perhaps? Sunday evenings when families gather? Not a haunting, but a reminder." Edward, who had been silent since the confrontation with the criminals, spoke quietly. "She protected us even after death. Through Anna, through the journal, through forcing us to see ourselves clearly. That's not torment. That's love." Our narrator must pause here to observe that love, like locksmithing, often works through indirection. We cannot always say what we mean, so we build elaborate mechanisms to speak for us, hoping those who matter will understand the message hidden in the machinery. October 19th broke gray and contemplative, with the kind of persistent drizzle that turns the world into an impressionist painting. Pieter worked alone in the Baroness's room, making the modifications to the musical box that the family had requested. The mechanism would now play on Sunday evenings at 8 o'clock, a time when, as Charlotte had pointed out, families naturally gathered. Father Antonius found him there in the afternoon, bringing tea and what appeared to be the weight of philosophical consideration. The priest settled into a chair with the careful movements of a man who had spent the morning on his knees in prayer. "I've been thinking about locks," the priest began without preamble. "Not the physical ones you craft, but the metaphorical ones we place on our souls. Your work here has been about opening both kinds." Peter adjusted a tiny spring, his concentration absolute. "I'm just a craftsman, Father. I work with brass and steel, not souls. Do you? Then why did young Willem tell me you've spent these years since your wife's death creating ever more complex locks, as if you could build a mechanism strong enough to keep grief at bay? The locksmith's hands stilled. Through the window he could see the estate's garden, where Edward and the Baron walked together, their conversation apparently civil, perhaps even warm. 5 days ago, such a scene would have been impossible. Clara died of consumption, Peter said quietly. I watched her fade over months, each day a little less of her, until what remained was more spirit than flesh. There's no lock that can hold back death, Father. No, Father Antonius agreed. But there are locks that can preserve memory. This musical box, for instance. It's not about death, but about ensuring remembrance. The Baroness understood something you're only now learning. The mechanisms we build survive us, carrying our intentions forward through time. Anna Moreau appeared in the doorway, dressed for travel. Behind her stood a young man carrying luggage, one of the estate's footmen, but the way he looked at her suggested more than professional duty. I'm leaving for Brussels, she announced. The family has been generous, a year's salary as parting gift, and a letter of recommendation that will open any door I choose. She moved into the room, her usual careful composure relaxed into something more natural. Thomas here has asked to accompany me. He's been offered work at the same household. The footman, Thomas, blushed, but stood straighter. He was perhaps 25, with the kind of honest face that suggested he would age into the sort of butler Joseph was, trusted, essential, invisible until needed. The Baroness would have been pleased, Peter observed, noting the way Anna's hand briefly touched Thomas's arm. She knew, Anna said simply, about Thomas and me. We were discreet, but Matilda saw everything. She once told me that love was like locksmithing. It required patience, precision, and the willingness to try again when the first attempt failed. After they left, Peter returned to his work while Father Antonius read from the Baroness's journal, which had become a kind of scripture for the household, consulted for wisdom, interpreted for meaning. Listen to this, the priest said. The mechanical arts teach us that function and beauty need not be separate. A well-made lock is both security and art, both practical and philosophical. It asks a question, who may enter, and provides the means to answer. Willem arrived as the sun was setting, bringing news from Ghent. Master, the Guild has awarded you the Antwerp Bank Commission. Hertog withdrew entirely from consideration. Seems his reputation suffered from the false witnesses incident. The boy was practically glowing, and not just from professional pride. Also, Marie's father has agreed. We can marry next spring, after my apprenticeship is complete. And will you take over my shop while I'm working in Antwerp? Willem's eyes widened. Master, I couldn't. I'm not ready. You're as ready as I was at your age, which is to say, not at all, but eager to learn from your mistakes. Peter smiled, remembering his own youth, the terror and excitement of first responsibilities. Besides, I'll need someone I trust managing things. This commission will take months. The Baron appeared, carrying a bottle of what appeared to be very old wine. 1828, he announced, the year my grandfather founded the first factory. I thought we should mark this moment properly. He poured for all present, even Willem, though the boy looked uncertain about accepting. To Mathilde, the Baron said, raising his glass, who loved us enough to show us ourselves and trusted us enough to believe we could improve. They drank, the wine tasting of age and patience, of time doing its slow work. Charlotte joined them, accompanied by a young man who could only be Peter Bruegel, thin, intense, with paint under his fingernails that no amount of scrubbing would remove. "Father," she said formally, "may I present Peter Bruegel, my fiancé?" The Baron studied the young man for a long moment. "Your ancestor painted the Tower of Babel, did he not? A meditation on human ambition and its failures." "Yes, my lord, though I prefer to paint landscapes, the world as it is, not as allegory." "And yet," the Baron mused, "you're marrying my daughter, which suggests either great ambition or great foolishness." "Love, my lord, which combines both." The Baron actually smiled. "Well answered. Mathilde would have liked you." As midnight approached, for they had all grown accustomed to gathering at this hour, Pieter made his final adjustments to the mechanism. The wire to the corridor clock had been severed, replaced by an internal timing mechanism that would activate at the appointed hour each Sunday. "One more thing," Charlotte said. She produced a small key from her pocket. "I had this made by the locksmith on Fistraat, not Hertog, the younger one. It's for the musical box, so it can be wound and maintained properly." She handed it to her father, who stood holding it as if it were made of spider silk. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "we should each have one. Not to lock away, but to open when needed. To remember that some mechanisms require multiple keys, multiple hands, to function properly." At midnight, the box played one final time on its original schedule. The family stood in a circle around it, watching the automaton perform her endless concert. When the music stopped, Peter activated the new mechanism, setting it for Sunday evening. "It's done," he announced. "The mechanical mystery is solved, the modification complete." But even as he spoke, our locksmith knew that the real mystery, how humans could hurt and heal each other simultaneously, how love could manifest as both tenderness and torment, remained as unsolvable as ever. Some locks, he had learned, were meant to remain complex, their mechanisms too intricate for any single key to open. The 20th of October dawned crisp and bright, one of those autumn mornings that seem to hold both ending and beginning in perfect balance. Peter packed his tools with the methodical care of a man who knows that each instrument has its purpose, its place in the order of things. The blue room, which had housed him these 8 days, looked different in the morning light, less haunted, more simply old, carrying its history with dignity rather than menace. Joseph helped him carry his cases to the carriage. The old butler moved with new purpose, as if the house's revelations had somehow straightened his spine. "The Baron would like a word before you depart," he said, then added more quietly, "The family owes you more than payment, Master van der Straten." The Baron waited in his study, but not alone. Edward stood by the window, clear-eyed for perhaps the first time since Peter had arrived. Charlotte sat at the desk, papers spread before her, household accounts by the look of them. The family had rearranged itself, found new positions in their domestic mechanism. "Your fee," the Baron said, handing Peter a leather purse considerably heavier than their original agreement, "with additions for services beyond locksmithing." Peter hefted it, feeling the weight of more than mere coins. "This is too much." "It's precisely calculated," Charlotte interrupted, showing him a ledger. "Mother kept accounts of everything, including what she believed fair payment should be. She wrote here, 'The locksmith who opens hearts as well as mechanisms deserves compensation for both.'" Our narrator must observe that the Baroness, even in death, remained one step ahead of everyone. a chess player who had planned her moves so far in advance that the game continued without her presence. Edouard stepped forward, offering his hand. "I leave for Kortrijk tomorrow to take over the factory. If you ever need textile supplies, or simply a reminder that men can change, you'll find both there." The handshake was firm, honest, the grip of a man who had stopped running from himself. Peter found himself thinking of his apprentice, Willem, of the ways we pass on not just skills, but possibilities. Back in his workshop on Corenly Street that afternoon, Peter found Willem had managed admirably in his absence. The shop was organized, several small jobs completed, and, most surprisingly, a new commission waited on the desk. "From the cathedral," Willem explained excitedly. "They want a lock for the treasury that changes its combination based on the church calendar. I told them you could do it. Was I wrong?" Peter studied the specifications, his mind already seeing the mechanism's possibilities. "Not wrong at all. We'll start tomorrow." But first, there was one more visit to make. Father Antonius had asked him to stop at the church before evening prayer. Peter found the priest in the vestry, sorting through papers that looked far older than anything should be. "Ah, Peter. I've been researching the Vandermeer family, the original owners of Wilgenhof. Fascinating what records reveal when properly examined." He produced a document, its edges brown with age. "The last Vandermeer, the one who died young in what's now the Blue Room, he was a locksmith too. Trained in Amsterdam, specialized in musical mechanisms." The coincidence was too pointed to be mere chance. Peter took the document, reading the faded ink carefully. He designed the corridor clock, the one the Baroness used for her mechanism. Indeed, and here's the interesting part. He died the night he completed it. Heart failure, they said, but his journal mentioned something else. He wrote that he'd built a mechanism to remember truth through time, whatever that means. They sat in companionable silence, two men considering the ways the past reaches forward to touch the present. Finally, Father Antonius spoke. "Do you believe in ghosts, Peter?" "I believe in mechanisms, in cause and effect, in the way a spring wound today will release its energy tomorrow." "And is memory not such a mechanism? Wound by experience, released by remembrance?" Before Peter could answer, the church bells began to ring, not the hour, but a wedding peal. Through the window they could see a small party approaching. Charlotte and her artist, accompanied by the Baron and a handful of witnesses. "A quiet ceremony," Father Antonius explained. "No society gathering, just family and truth." The Baroness would have approved. 1 month later, November bringing its first snow to Flanders, Peter received a letter delivered by Joseph himself. The old butler had traveled from Wilgenhof specifically for this purpose, which suggested its importance. Inside was a note in Charlotte's hand. "The musical box plays perfectly each Sunday. The family gathers, we share a meal, and for 3 minutes we remember. Edouard has been sober 40 days. Father has ended his Ghent arrangements. I am teaching music to factory children while Peter paints. We are not perfect, but we are trying. Mother's mechanism works still, though now we understand its purpose." Enclosed was something else, a small mechanical device no bigger than a pocket watch. When Peter wound it, it played a few notes of Mozart's Requiem, then fell silent. A remembrance device, portable and personal. That evening, as November rain began to tap against his workshop windows, Pieter sat at his bench, the small music box before him. Willem had gone home to Marie. The shop was quiet. And in that quietness, Pieter thought he could hear other mechanisms at work. The great clock of seasons turning. The smaller gears of human hearts learning to mesh with one another. The vast mechanism of time that carries all our stories forward. He thought of Clara, dead these 5 years. And for the first time, the memory brought more sweetness than sorrow. She would have liked the Baroness, he thought. Would have understood the elaborate mechanism of forced remembrance, the lock that could only be opened by working together. The small music box played its fragment of Requiem, and Pieter realized that he had been wrong about locks. They weren't about keeping things out or in, they were about the moment of opening. That instant when the mechanism yields and what was separate becomes connected. Every lock was a promise that opening was possible, that what was hidden could be revealed, that isolation was not permanent. Outside, Ghent settled into evening, the city's many church bells marking time in their ancient way. In houses throughout the city, families gathered for evening meals, each their own mechanism of connection and conflict, love and disappointment, memory and hope. And in a workshop on Corinlay Street, a locksmith sat at his bench, designing a new lock for the cathedral, one that would change with the calendar, marking feast days and ordinary time alike, a mechanism that would remember the sacred in the everyday. His hands, trained in the detection of tiny imperfections, moved with perfect certainty. Some stories end with revelation, others with revolution. But this one, being true to life, ends with continuation, the gentle sound of rain on windows, the warmth of a coal stove, the promise that tomorrow's work waits patiently for tomorrow's hands. The Baroness's ghost, if ghost it ever was, had been laid to rest not by exorcism, but by understanding. The mechanism she built continued its work, teaching her family that love, like a well-made lock, functions best when all its parts move in harmony. In the drawer of his workbench, Pieter kept the small music box, and sometimes, when the shop was quiet and the day's work done, he would wind it and listen to those few notes of Mozart. They reminded him that we are all mechanisms of memory, wound by loss, released by love, keeping time until our own springs finally unwind. And somewhere in Flanders, in a manor house where shadows had learned to behave themselves, a musical box waited patiently for Sunday evening, when it would play again, not as haunting, but as benediction, not as torment, but as reminder that some mechanisms, once set in motion, continue long after their creator's hands have stilled.